Elena Martinez closed her eyes and let the music flow through her fingers. The violin sang in the quiet cargo bay of the Starship Harmony, its notes dancing through the recycled air like living things. She had been practicing for 3 hours, but time meant nothing when she played. The bow moved across the strings with perfect control, creating sounds that seemed impossible from such a simple wooden instrument. The ship hummed around her, a steady background noise that most people stopped hearing after a few days in space. But Elena heard everything. She heard the slight wobble in the engine that meant they needed new power cells soon. She heard the air filters working harder than usual. She even heard the soft footsteps of crew members walking through the corridors 2 decks above her. Brother Jake always said she had magic ears. Elena just called it paying attention. The piece she played was old, from Earth, written by a man named Batch hundreds of years ago. Most people her age listened to quantum synth music or neural wave compositions. But Elena loved the ancient music, the kind that came from wood and metal and human breath. There was something real about it that all the fancy computer music could not touch. She was halfway through a difficult passage when her wrist communicator buzzed. Elena ignored it. The music was reaching its peak, and she could not stop now. The violin seemed to glow in her hands, though she knew that was impossible. The notes grew stronger, more complex, building to something that made her heart race. The communicator buzzed again. Then again. Elena opened her eyes with a sigh and lowered her violin. The cargo bay felt empty without the music, like someone had sucked all the color out of the world. She touched the communicator with her free hand. Elena here. Kid, you need to get to the bridge right now. Jake's voice sounded strange, tight with worry. And bring your violin. Why would I bring my violin to the bridge? Just do it, please. Elena had never heard her big brother say please like that before. Jake was a starship captain, used to giving orders and having them followed without question. He did not ask nicely for things, especially not from his little sister. She packed her violin in its case and walked through the ship's narrow corridors. The Harmony was not a big vessel, designed for medium-distance transport between human colonies. Elena had lived on ships like this for most of her 19 years, following Jake from one assignment to another. Their parents had died when she was 7, and Jake had raised her in the space between the stars. The bridge was crowded when she arrived. Captain Sullivan stood at the main console, his face grim as he read something on the display. Dr. Lisa Chang, the ship's science officer, looked up when Elena entered. There she is, Dr. Chang said. Elena, we just received an emergency transmission from Earth Central Command. Elena set down her violin case. What kind of emergency? Jake turned to face her. His expression was serious, but she could see something else in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or confusion. Something's happening at the edge of the galaxy, he said. Something big. The Galactic Confederation is calling for help from every member species. Elena knew about the Confederation. It was a group of 12 different alien races that worked together, sharing technology and knowledge. Humans had joined only 50 years ago, and most of the other species still treated them like children. They thought human culture was primitive, especially human art and music. What does that have to do with me? Elena asked. Dr. Chang pulled up a holographic display in the center of the bridge. It showed a map of the galaxy, with thousands of tiny lights representing star systems. At the very edge, where the lights grew thin, something dark was moving. We call them the Void Singers, Dr. Chang explained. They appeared 3 weeks ago. Massive entities, bigger than space stations. They emit some kind of energy that shuts down all technology within 1,000 kilometers. Ships just stop working, Jake added. Engines die. Life support fails. Computers go blank. The Confederation has lost 17 vessels trying to make contact. Elena stared at the dark shapes on the display. They seemed to pulse with their own rhythm, expanding and contracting like they were breathing. I still don't understand why. You called me up here. Dr. Chang and Jake exchanged a look. Finally, Dr. Chang spoke. The Confederation scientists are out of ideas. They've tried every form of communication they know. Radio, quantum transmission, mathematical sequences, even telepathic contact with the races that can manage it. Nothing works. The entities keep sending out these pulses, Jake continued. Complex patterns that repeat every few hours. The alien scientists think it might be some kind of language, but they can't decode it. Elena began to understand. And they want to try music. They want to try human music, Dr. Chong corrected. Apparently, one of the Confederation's cultural experts suggested that humans might have insights the other races lack. Something about our primitive sound-making methods. Elena bristled at the word primitive. She had heard it before, usually, from aliens who thought human art was a waste of time and brain power. They could build machines that travel faster than light, but they thought a violin was useless noise. So they're asking for musicians, Elena said. They're asking for the best musicians humanity has, Jake replied. And according to the files Earth Central has on record, that includes you. Elena felt a flutter of pride mixed with terror. She was good at violin. She knew that. But the best? There were virtuosos on Earth with decades more experience. People who played in the great concert halls and commanded audiences of millions. There has to be some mistake, Dr. Chong shook her head. I've heard you play, Elena. What you do with that instrument. It's not normal. You make sounds that shouldn't be possible. It was true, though Elena had never thought much about it. Sometimes when she played, especially when she was lost in the music, her violin seemed to produce harmonics that did not follow the usual rules. Jake had always said it was because she practiced so much, but Elena suspected it was something else, something she did not fully understand. We're already changing course for the Confederation capital, Jake said. You'll be part of a small team of human musicians and scientists. If there's any chance that music can reach these void singers, you'll be the one to find it. Elena looked at her violin case, then back at the dark shades pulsing on the holographic display. Somewhere out there, massive alien entities were trying to communicate, and 17 ships full of people had already died attempting to make contact. She picked up her violin case. When do we leave? The Confederation capital was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. Crystal towers stretched into the purple sky, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Flying vehicles moved between the spires in perfect geometric formations, guided by computer systems that never made mistakes. Elena pressed her face against the transport window as they descended toward the landing platform. The city below seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, but it was cold and mechanical, nothing like the warm chaos of human settlements. First time seeing a truly advanced civilization? Asked Dr. Chang, who sat across from her in the small shuttle. It's beautiful, Elena replied, though she was not sure she meant it. But it feels empty somehow. Jake laughed from the pilot's seat. That's because it is empty. No art, no music, no creativity, just pure function. The shuttle touched down on a platform that was perfectly smooth and perfectly clean. Elena grabbed her violin case and followed the others out into the alien air. It smelled of ozone and something sharp that made her nose itch. A delegation waited for them on the platform. Elena recognized the species from her basic xenobiology classes. There was Zektar, a tall crystalline being whose body looked like living glass. His people were the Karthik, known for their perfect logic and mathematical precision. Next to him stood Velinara, one of the telepathic Morallans. Her pale blue skin seemed to shimmer in the strange light, and her large black eyes held no warmth. Welcome to the Confederation capital, Zektar said in perfect English. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a breeze. We are grateful that humanity has answered our call for assistance. Elena could hear the doubt in his tone. The aliens were desperate if they were asking humans for help. Dr. Chong stepped forward. We're honored to be here. This is Captain Sullivan and his sister, Elena, one of our finest musicians. Velinara's eyes fixed on Elena with uncomfortable intensity. "So young," she said. "Are you certain this child possesses the necessary skills?" "I'm 19, Elena said, trying to keep the irritation out of her voice. "And yes, I know how to. Play violin." "Violin," Zektar repeated the word like he was tasting something bitter. "A primitive sound-making device. We have studied your human music. Random vibrations in the atmospheric medium. We failed to understand how such chaos could serve any useful purpose." Elena felt her temper rising, but Jake put a warning hand on her shoulder. They needed these aliens' cooperation. Even if they were rude, the group walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Everything was made of the same crystal material, smooth and seamless. Elena's footsteps echoed strangely, creating brief harmonies that vanished as quickly as they appeared. They arrived at a massive chamber filled with beings from all 12 Confederation species. Elena had never seen so many different kinds of alien life in one place. Some were humanoid, others looked like living trees or floating gas clouds. A few were so strange, she could not even guess how they moved or breathed. At the center of the chamber sat a holographic display showing the Void Singers. Elena gasped when she saw them clearly for the first time. They were beautiful and terrible, like living storms made of shadow and light. Each one was the size of a small moon, with tentacles that stretched for kilometers. They moved through space in slow, graceful patterns that reminded Elena of a dance. "Magnificent, are they not?" said a voice behind her. Elena turned to see another alien, this one from a species she did not recognize. It looked like a giant insect with silver skin and multiple arms. "I am Krythek of the Nexari. We have been studying these entities for weeks." "What have you learned?" Dr. John asked. "Very little," Krythek admitted. "They emit complex patterns of energy that repeat in cycles. We believe it may be language, but we cannot decode the meaning. Every attempt at communication has failed." Zektar gestured to the display. "Show them the latest recordings." The hologram shifted to show wave patterns, streams of data that pulsed and flowed like music made visible. Elena stared at the patterns, her mind automatically trying to find rhythm and melody in the chaos. "These are the transmissions from the Void Singers," Zektar explained. "We have analyzed every frequency, every mathematical relationship. There is structure here, but it follows no logic we understand." Elena opened her violin case and lifted out her instrument. Several aliens stepped back as if she had drawn a weapon. "What are you doing?" Velinara demanded. "I want to hear it," Elena said simply. "You've been looking at the data, but have you actually listened to it? Listened?" Zektar's crystalline face somehow managed to look confused. "The transmissions are in frequencies far beyond biological hearing range." "Then convert them," Elena said. "Take the patterns and translate them into sound frequencies we can hear." Dr. Chan looked interested. "That's actually not a bad idea. We do that kind of conversion all the time in radio astronomy." Kryvik. Multiple arms moved over a control panel. "It will take a few moments to process the data." While they waited, Elena tuned her violin. The sound of the strings being adjusted seemed unnaturally loud in the crystal chamber. She noticed that some of the aliens flinched when she drew the bow across the strings to test the tuning. "Ready," Krythek announced. The chamber filled with sound unlike anything Elena had ever heard. It was deep and complex, like the voices of whales mixed with the rumble of thunder. But underneath the alien tones, she could hear something else. Patterns, rhythms, almost like ... It's music, she whispered. "Impossible," Zektar said. "Music is a primitive human concept. These beings are clearly attempting mathematical communication." Elena was not listening to him anymore. She raised her violin and began to play, matching the alien tones as best she could. Her instrument could not reproduce the deep bass notes, but she found the harmonies hidden in the patterns. The melody that emerged was strange and beautiful. Like nothing she had ever played before, the effect on the aliens was immediate. Velinara stumbled backward, her black eyes wide with shock. Crythic-ass arms froze over the control panel. Even Zektar's crystalline form seemed to dim. What is that? Velinara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elena continued playing, following the patterns in the Void Singer's transmissions. As she played, she began to understand something incredible. The alien entities were not trying to communicate with mathematics or logic. They were singing and now, for the first time in weeks. Someone was singing back. The chamber fell silent, except for Elena's violin. Every alien in the room stared at her with expressions ranging from confusion to fear to something that might have been wonder. Elena lowered her instrument and looked around at the assembled beings. I think, she said quietly, we need to try a different approach. The small scout ship Seeker moved through space like a silver needle threading through black cloth. Elena sat in the passenger compartment, her violin case balanced on her knees, watching the stars grow brighter as they left the capital behind. In 3 days, they would reach the edge of the galaxy where the Void Singers waited. Jake piloted the ship while Dr. Chang monitored the scientific equipment they had installed. The Confederation had given them every sensor and communication device they could fit into the small vessel. But Elena knew the most important equipment was the simple audio system connected to her violin pickup. Still can't believe they actually agreed to this, Jake muttered from the pilot's seat. After Elena's demonstration in the crystal chamber, the Confederation leaders had spent hours debating. Half of them thought the human girl was onto something important. The other half believed she was just making noise and wasting everyone's time. In the end, desperation won over doubt. Zektar looked like he swallowed something sour when they approved the mission, Dr. Chang said with a smile. Elena had not forgotten the crystalline alien's final words to her. If you fail, young human, you will have wasted resources that could have been used for proper scientific analysis. But Velinara had surprised her by pulling her aside before departure. I felt something when you played, the telepathic alien had whispered. Something I have never experienced before. I do not understand it, but I cannot forget it. Now, 3 days out from the capital, Elena practiced constantly. She played the patterns they had recorded from the Void Singers, trying to understand. The alien music. It was unlike anything from Earth. The melodies seemed to exist in multiple dimensions, with harmonies that should have been impossible. How much farther? Elena asked, setting down her violin. Jake checked the navigation display. 2 hours until we reach the outer marker. That's where ships start having problems. Elena felt her stomach tighten. 17 ships had been lost, trying to contact the Void Singers. The crews had simply vanished when their vessels stopped working. No distress calls, no wreckage, nothing. Remember the plan, Dr. Chang said. We stay at maximum sensor range and try to establish communication. If anything goes wrong with the ship's systems, we retreat immediately. Elena nodded, but she was not really listening. Something had been bothering her about the recordings. The patterns were too complex for random communication. They had structure, rhythm, even what sounded like emotional content. But there was something else, something she could not quite identify. An alarm chimed softly. Jake's hands moved over the controls. We just crossed the outer marker, he announced. All systems normal so far. Elena looked out the viewport. The stars seemed different here, somehow dimmer. Space itself felt strange, as if the normal rules did not apply. Beginning sensor sweep, Dr. Chang reported. Looking for the Void Singers. Minutes passed in tense silence. Elena found herself holding her breath, though she did not know why. The ship hummed around them, all systems functioning normally. Contact, Dr. Chang said suddenly. 3 entities, bearing 27 Mark IV. Distance approximately 500 kilometers. Elena pressed her face to the viewport, but saw only darkness. Then Dr. Chang enhanced the image on the main display. And Elena gasped. The Void Singers were even more beautiful than the recordings had shown. They moved through space like living symphonies, their dark forms pulsing with internal light. Each one was unique, with different patterns of tentacles and energy fields. They seemed to dance around each other in slow, graceful orbits. "They're gorgeous," Elena whispered. "They're also scanning us," Jake said grimly. "I'm reading energy pulses directed at our ship. All systems still normal," Dr. Chang added. "Whatever's causing the technology failures, we're not close enough." Yet, Elena opened her violin case and lifted out her instrument. "Let me try to talk to them." She connected the pickup to the ship's communication array and began to play. She started with the patterns they had recorded, matching the alien melodies as closely as she could. Her violin sang out across the emptiness, carried by radio waves toward the massive entities. The response was immediate. The Void Singers stopped their graceful dance and oriented toward the small ship. Their internal lights began pulsing in new patterns, and the ship's sensors picked up a flood of transmissions. "They're responding," Dr. Chang said excitedly. The signal strength is increasing rapidly. Elena continued playing, following the new patterns as they emerged. The music was becoming more complex, with layered harmonies that seemed to tell a story. She could almost understand what they were trying to say. Then something went wrong. The ship's lights flickered. The steady hum of the engine stuttered for a moment before returning to normal. "Jake," Dr. Chang said quietly, "we need to back away." Now, but Elena could not stop playing. The music was reaching a critical point, building towards something important. The Void Singers were trying to tell her something vital, and she was so close to understanding. "Elena," Jake called from the pilot's seat, "we have to go. The engines are starting to fail." More systems began flickering. The artificial gravity wavered, making Elena's stomach lurch. But still she played, following the alien melodies as they grew more urgent. And then she understood. The Void Singers were not trying to attack or threaten anyone. They were crying for help. The complex patterns she had been hearing were not just music. They were a desperate plea from beings who were lost and alone. They had been trying to communicate for weeks, but no one had been able to hear their song. Elena modified her playing, adding her own melodies to theirs. She played comfort and understanding, letting them know that someone finally heard them. The effect was immediate. The Void Singers' lights grew brighter, their movements more excited. They were responding to her music with what could only be described as joy, but the ship was dying around them. The engines went silent, leaving them drifting in space. Life support systems began failing one by one. In minutes, they would be breathing recycled air that was running out fast. "Elena, we have to leave now," Jake shouted. Elena finally stopped playing and looked around at the darkening bridge. Emergency lights cast red shadows on their faces. They had maybe 10 minutes of life support left, but she had done it. She had made contact with the Void Singers, and what she had learned changed everything. "They're not hostile," she said breathlessly. "They're refugees. They're lost and scared and trying to find help." The ship shuddered as Jake fired the emergency thrusters, pushing them away from the Void Singers. As they retreated, the entities followed for a short distance, their lights pulsing in patterns that Elena now recognized as sadness. They were begging her not to leave. But the ship's systems came back online as they moved away, and Jake was able to restart the engines. They escaped back to safe space, carrying with them the most important discovery in galactic history. The Void Singers were not invaders. They were people asking for help, and Elena was the only one who could hear their song. Elena sat in the medical bay of the Confederation capital, electrodes attached to her temples while Dr. Chen monitored her vital signs. The return journey from the Void Singers had taken 4 days, and Elena had spent every waking moment working on the translation. Her hands shook from exhaustion, and her eyes burned from staring at wave patterns for hours at a time. "You need to rest," Dr. Chang said, checking the readings. "Your brain activity is off the charts." This level of mental strain could be dangerous. Elena shook her head and reached for her violin. I'm close to something important. The patterns. They're not just random songs. There's a story in the music, something about where they came from. Jake paced back and forth across the small room. His face was tight with worry. You've been at this for 16 hours straight. Take a break, kid. I can't stop now, Elena insisted. She raised her violin and began playing one of the new melodies. She had decoded. The music was sad and beautiful, filled with longing and loss. Listen to this. This is about their home. The melody painted pictures and sound. Elena could almost see the dying galaxy the Void Singers had left behind, stars going dark one by one as some terrible force consumed everything in its path. The entities have fled across the vast emptiness between galaxies, searching for a new place to exist. They've been traveling for thousands of years, Elena said as she played. They're the last survivors of their entire galaxy. Dr. Chan looked up from her instruments. That's impossible. Nothing could survive that long in intergalactic space. Elena stopped playing and fixed her with a tired stare. They're not like U.S. Lisa. They don't need planets or air or food. They feed on cosmic radiation and quantum fluctuations. But they do need something else. What? Community, connection. They're social beings, but they're alone. They've been alone for so long that they're starting to lose themselves. Elena picked up her violin again and played another section of the translation. This melody was different, more urgent and desperate. It told a mind slowly fragmenting, of beings who had once been part of a great civilization forgetting who they were. That's why their presence disrupts technology, Elena continued. They're not doing it on purpose. Their minds are unstable, broadcasting chaotic quantum fields. They can't control it anymore. Jake stopped pacing. So they're dangerous. No, Elena said firmly. They're sick. And they're getting worse. A chime sounded, and Zektar entered the medical bay. The crystalline alien looked even more skeptical than usual. The council has reviewed your initial report, he said in his wind chime voice. They find your conclusions highly questionable. Elena set down her violin. Which part? That they're refugees, or that they're dying? All of it. You claim to have decoded their language based on musical patterns. This is not scientifically rigorous analysis. Then explain this, Elena said. She connected her violin to the room's audio system and began playing a complex piece she had been working on. It was a conversation, question and answer patterns woven together in harmony. This is me asking them about their quantum disruption field, and this is their response. She played the answering melody, a sad song that spoke of loss of control. A power that once served them now running wild.Ekatar's crystalline form flickered slightly. You are asking us to believe that you can communicate complex scientific concepts through primitive sound vibrations. I'm not asking you to believe anything, Elena snapped. I'm telling you what I learned. Whether you accept it or not is up to you. The alien stared at her for a long moment. Very well. Assuming your translation is accurate, what do these entities want from us? Elena played another melody, this one filled with hope and pleading. They want help. They want to find a place where they can exist without hurting anyone. And they want to remember who they used to be. Impossible. We cannot provide such assistance. Why not? Because it would require us to allow potentially dangerous beings to remain in our galaxy. The Council will never approve such a risk. Elena felt anger rising in her chest. So you're just going to let them die? If necessary, yes. The safety of our member species comes first. Elena stood up, yanking the electrodes off her temples. They're people, Zektar. They have thoughts and feelings and memories. They've already lost everything once. Are you really going to take away their last chance at survival? The crystalline alien's form grew brighter. They are not people. They are energy entities of unknown origin and capability. The fact that you can produce sounds that seem to match their transmissions proves nothing. It proves I can talk to them, Elena said. And right now, I'm the only one who can. Zektar turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. The council will make their decision within the day. I suggest you prepare yourself for disappointment, young human. After he left, Elena slumped back in her chair. Jake put a hand on her shoulder. Don't let him get to you, he said. You did something amazing out there. It won't matter if the council decides to destroy them, Elena replied. I can feel it in their music. They're so tired, Jake. They've been running for so long, and they're ready to give up. Dr. Chang looked up from her data. There might be another way. Elena and Jake both turned to her. What if we could help them control their quantum field? If we could stabilize their mental state, they wouldn't be dangerous to our technology. How? Elena asked. I don't know yet, but your music seems to have some kind of calming effect on them. Maybe if we could establish a permanent communication link, provide them with regular contact, it might help them maintain their sanity. Elena felt a spark of hope, like therapy through music. Exactly. It's worth trying, at least. Elena picked up her violin again and began working on a new composition. This one was different from the others, not just a translation, but something entirely new. She combined human musical structures with the alien patterns, creating something that belonged to both species. As she played, she thought about the void singers drifting alone in the darkness, their ancient minds slowly crumbling. They had traveled across the emptiness between galaxies, carrying the last memories of their dead civilization. They deserved better than fear and rejection. They deserved a chance to live. Elena played late into the night, crafting melodies that spoke of hope and healing. Outside the medical bay, the Crystal City hummed with alien efficiency. But inside the small room, something entirely human was taking shape. Music that could save a dying species. Music that could bridge the gap between two completely different forms of life. Elena's fingers moved across the strings, weaving together sounds that had never existed before. She was creating something new, something perfect, something that might just work. Elena stood before the full Confederation Council, her violin case at her feet and her heart pounding in her chest. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from all 12 member species, their alien faces showing everything from curiosity to open hostility. At the center of the room, a holographic display showed the current position of the Void Singers, still waiting at the galaxy's edge. The council has heard your reports, announced Velinara, who was serving as the session's moderator. We have also reviewed the data from your encounter. Now we must decide what action to take. Zektar rose from his crystal seat. The evidence is clear. These entities pose an unacceptable risk to our civilization. Their very presence disrupts our technology. They must be removed from our galaxy by any means necessary. A murmur of agreement rippled through several sections of the chamber. Elena clenched her fists, fighting the urge to interrupt. However, Velinara continued, the human representative has requested permission to address the council before we vote. Elena Martinez, you may speak. Elena opened her violin case with trembling hands. She had spent 3 days preparing for this moment, working on a composition that would prove her point better than any words could. But now, facing the assembled aliens, she felt very small and very young. You see the Void Singers as a threat, she began, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. But I've talked with them. I've heard their story. They're not invaders or conquerors. They're the last survivors of a dead galaxy, and they're dying. She lifted her violin and positioned it under her chin. I want to play something for you. This is their history, translated into music you can understand. Elena began to play, and the chamber filled with a melody of unimaginable sadness. She played the death of a galaxy, billions of stars going dark as an ancient evil consumed everything in its path. She played the desperate flight of the last survivors, Traveling for thousands of years to empty space. As the music continued, something strange happened. Several of the alien representatives began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. The telepathic species, like Velanara, looked particularly affected. Even Zektar's crystalline form seemed to dim slightly. Elena played their arrival at this galaxy, their joy at finding life and civilization again. But then the music turned dark, showing their growing madness, their loss of control, their inability to communicate their peaceful intentions. When she finished, the chamber was completely silent. "That is their story?" Elena said softly. "They don't want to hurt anyone. They just want to find a place where they can exist without being alone." Krythek, the insect-like Nexari representative, spoke up. "Even if we accept your interpretation of their transmissions, the problem remains. Their presence makes our technology unreliable. How can we coexist with beings who disrupt the very foundations of our civilization?" Elena had been hoping someone would ask that question. "I believe I can help them control it." The chamber erupted in surprised chatter. Zektar's voice cut through the noise. "Impossible! You are suggesting that primitive human music can solve a problem that has baffled our greatest scientists." "Not solve it," Elena corrected. "Treat it. Their quantum disruption is caused by mental instability. Isolation and trauma have damaged their minds. But music can heal." She played a different melody, one she had composed specifically for the Void Singers. It was a lullaby of sorts, designed to calm chaotic thoughts and provide emotional comfort. As she played, she explained her theory. "On Earth, we use music therapy to help people with all kinds of mental problems. Music can reduce anxiety, improve memory, even help repair damaged neural pathways. I think the same principles can work with the Void Singers." Dr. Chang, who had been sitting quietly in the human delegation section, stood up. "I've been studying Elena's data for 3 days. Her approach has scientific merit. The Void Singer's brain patterns stabilize when they're exposed to specific musical frequencies. You are asking us to trust our entire civilization to an untested theory," Zektar said coldly. Elena lowered her violin. "I'm asking you to give them a chance. Let me try to help them. If it works, everyone benefits. If it doesn't, you can still make whatever decision you want." Velanara leaned forward in her seat. "What exactly are you proposing?" Elena took a deep breath. "I want to compose a navigation symphony. A piece of music that will guide the Void Singers to a safe location where they can't harm anyone, while also providing them with the mental stability they need." The chamber fell silent again. Elena could feel the weight of 12 different species. Attention focused on her. "The empty regions between galactic arms," Dr. Chang added. "There are vast areas with no star systems, no civilizations. The Void Singers could exist there safely. And you believe your music can guide them there?" asked another representative, this one from a species Elena didn't recognize. "I know it can," Elena said with more confidence than she felt. "They respond to musical patterns like instructions. I can create a composition that shows them the way to safety while helping them heal their damaged minds." Zektar stood again. "This is madness. We should destroy these entities before they become an even greater threat." "You can't destroy them," Elena said sharply. "You tried that already, remember? 17 ships couldn't even get close enough to fire a shot. They're too powerful and too unpredictable. But they listen to music." She played a few notes, a simple melody that somehow conveyed the concept of peace and safety. "This is the only language they understand now. I'm the only one who can speak it." The debate continued for hours. Representatives argued about risk and responsibility, about the value of alien life versus the safety of their own species. Elena sat quietly through most of it, her violin across her lap, listening to them discuss the fate of beings they had never tried to understand. Finally, Velanara called for order. "The council will now vote. All in favor of allowing the human musician to attempt her navigation symphony?" Elena held her breath as the votes were counted. It was close, much closer than she had hoped. But when the final tally was announced, she had won by a single vote. "The motion passes," Velinara announced. "Elena Martinez, you have permission to attempt communication with the Void Singers. You will have one opportunity to guide them to safety. If you fail, or if they pose any increased threat to our member worlds, the Council reserves the right to take more decisive action." Elena stood up, her legs shaky with relief and terror. "How long do I have?" 7 days to compose your symphony. Then we travel to the edge of the galaxy, and you perform it for them. 7 days to create the most important piece of music in galactic history. 7 days to save an entire species from extinction. Elena picked up her violin case and headed for the door. She had work to do. Elena had not slept in 36 hours. Her fingers were raw from playing, her back ached from hunching over music sheets, and her eyes burned from the strain. But the navigation symphony was finally complete. She sat alone in her quarters aboard the Confederation flagship Unity, staring at the handwritten notes that covered every surface of the small room. The composition was unlike anything that had ever existed. It combined human musical theory with alien mathematical concepts, weaving together melodies that could guide massive spacefaring entities across thousands of light years while healing their fractured minds. A soft chime indicated someone at her door. Elena looked up to see Jake entering with a tray of food. "You need to eat something," he said, setting the tray on her desk. "And sleep. The performance is in 6 hours." Elena shook her head. "I can't sleep. What if I made a mistake? What if the symphony doesn't work?" Jake sat down beside her and picked up one of the music sheets. The notes looked normal enough, but Elena had marked them with strange symbols and equations that made no sense to him. "You've checked it 100 times, he said gently. "It's going to work. But what if it doesn't? The Council will order the Void Singers destroyed. An entire species will die because I couldn't get the music right." Elena picked up her violin and played a few measures from the symphony's opening movement. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, but also somehow alien. It seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal music, with harmonies that her ear could hear, but her mind couldn't quite understand. "I keep feeling like I'm missing something," she continued. "The mathematical relationships are correct. The frequency patterns match their neural signatures, but something still feels wrong." Jake put his arm around his sister's shoulders. "Maybe you're overthinking it. You've always said that the best music comes from the heart, not from calculations." Elena was quiet for a moment, considering his words. Then she set down her violin and picked up the main score. She had written it like a classical symphony, with precise notations for every note and timing. But maybe that was the problem. "You're right," she said suddenly. "I've been treating this like a math problem, but it's not. It's music. It's communication between living beings." She grabbed the pencil and began making changes to the score. Instead of rigid timing, she marked sections for improvisation. Instead of exact notes, she indicated emotional themes that could be adapted in real time. "What are you doing?" Jake asked. "Making it perfect," Elena replied. "The Void Singers don't. Think like computers. They're artists, just like me. They need music that can breathe and change and respond to their feelings." Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway. "Elena, we're approaching the edge of the galaxy. The Void Singers are straight ahead." Elena looked out her small porthole and saw them in the distance. 3 massive entities, beautiful and terrible, drifting through space like living storms. They were bigger than she remembered, each one the size of a small moon. As the Unity drew closer, she could see the intricate patterns of light that played across their dark surfaces. "Ship systems are starting to fluctuate," Jake reported, checking his portable scanner. "We need to maintain distance, or we'll lose power like last time." Elena packed her violin and followed them to the main bridge. The Unity was the largest ship in the Confederation fleet, designed to house representatives from all member species. The bridge was crowded with alien dignitaries who had come to witness what might be the most important first contact in galactic history. Zektar stood near the main display, his crystalline form reflecting the light from the Void Singers. "Are you prepared, human?" Elena nodded, though her stomach was churning with nervousness. "As ready as I'll ever be." The ship's communication officer, a blue-skinned Kithran, looked up from his console. "We're receiving transmissions from the entities. They're the same. Patterns as before, but stronger. Put it through the speakers," Elena requested. The bridge filled with the deep, complex tones of the Void Singers' natural communication. Elena listened carefully, trying to understand their emotional state. They sounded excited but also frightened. They knew something important was about to happen. Elena connected her violin to the ship's communication array and took a deep breath. Everything depended on the next few minutes. She began to play. The opening movement was gentle and welcoming, letting the Void Singers know that she had returned and was ready to help them. Their response was immediate. The patterns of light on. Their surfaces began to pulse in rhythm with her music, and their transmissions shifted to match her melodies. As the symphony progressed, Elena told them a story through music. She played of safe places far from inhabited worlds, of empty space where they could exist without fear or loneliness. She showed them the path they needed to take, encoding star charts and navigation data into the mathematical relationships between notes, but most importantly, she played healing. She wove melodies that spoke of hope and recovery, of minds growing strong again after long trauma. The music was a medicine for their damaged psyches, a balm for wounds that had festered. For thousands of years, the Void Singers began to move. Slowly at first, then with growing confidence, they oriented themselves toward the path Elena's music described. Their chaotic quantum fields started to stabilize, becoming more focused and controlled. Elena could feel the change through her violin. The instrument seemed to vibrate with energy that wasn't entirely physical. She was connected to the Void Singers now, linked by music that transcended the normal boundaries between species. The symphony reached its climax, and Elena pushed herself beyond anything she had ever attempted before. She played notes that shouldn't have been possible on her instrument, harmonies that existed in spaces between dimensions. Her violin sang with a voice that was both human and alien, both ancient and newly born. Around the bridge, every being present felt something they had never experienced before. The music bypassed their logical minds and spoke directly to something deeper. For a brief, perfect moment, every consciousness in the area was connected, sharing emotions and understanding across the vast differences between species. The Void Singers began their journey, following the musical path Elena had created for them. As they moved away from inhabited space, their quantum disruption fields faded. Ship systems returned to normal, and the immediate threat to the galaxy ended. But Elena continued playing. The final movement of her symphony was a promise. She would return to check on them to provide the musical therapy they needed to fully heal. She would not let them be alone again. When she finally lowered her violin, the bridge was completely silent. Tears streamed down Dr. Chang's face. Even Zektar's crystalline form seemed somehow softer. "It is done," Elena said quietly. Through the main display, they watched the Void Singers disappear into the empty darkness between galactic arms. Following the song that would lead them to safety and peace, Elena's violin had saved them all.